Open po ng camera, please. Si MJ. Saka si Carlo. Si Carlo. Wala kang cam?
Wala po, sir.
Okay. Sige, start na tayo, no? Gising na. Okay? Dito tayo sa lecture natin ngayon. So, continuation ulit ng computer networks. Okay? So, mukhang part 3 na. Okay? Kasi pag-uusapan natin ay cable. But bukas yung OSI layers. Okay? With comes to network. Okay? So, ang topic natin is all about network cable. Kasi di ba yung pinag-discuss natin na nakaraan, topology, okay? What is network? And then, ano ba yung mga hardware devices that the uses for the network, okay? So, connection, ano pa ba? Mga type topology. Yan, diniscuss natin. Ngayon, we're going to the cable. So, network cable ito, okay? So it's a medium through which information usually moves from one network to another. Okay? Kaya napag-aralan natin yung topology kasi to connect one network of computer to the other network. Okay? Para magkaroon sila ng access sa bawat isa. So kailangan ng network cable. There are several types of cable, mostly commonly used with the LAN. Okay? Kasi 'di ba sinabi natin LAN is local area network, so within the facility, for example, kahit iba-ibang flooring, but of course, para makakonect yung between computers sa mga servers at sa mga routers, you use LAN cable, which is yung Cat5, Cat6, which is later on we'll be discussing the types of network cable na ginagamit natin. Okay? So in some cases, network will utilize only one type of cable for a network that is related to your network's topology, protocol, and size. So, meron tong sinasabi ko nakaraan, may architectural design din kasi ang cabling. So, tinatawag tong structural cabling. Kumbaga, for example, the entire floor ng building, so kailangan i-set up yon sa computer, gaano kahaba yung kable na paglalakbayan niya from the server to the computers. Okay? So lahat 'yon i-calculate. So ano gagamitin na topology? Ano gagamitin ng mga certain configurations para lang talaga ma-access sila. Okay? So understanding the characteristics of different types of cable and how they relate in other aspects of a network is necessary for the development of successful network. Okay? Kasi kailangan kasi ng sabi ko structured cabling para at least mas maayos yung flow ng at hindi rin parang spaghetti. Okay? Lalo na mas challengeable na yan kapag ka nasa IT rooms na yan, nasa server rooms kasi nakakonect lahat ng mga kable natin. So konting mali lang dyan, definitely may isa na mawawala ng connection. And ngayon kasi, ang topology na natin ngayon, mga hybrid, mga star. So wala na masyado gumagamit ng ring, ng batawag dito ng bus topology kasi very rare na siya and unang panahon pa siya. Kasi ngayon mostly tayo 3 hybrid, yan, yung mga topology are star. Okay? So now, so ano ba yung mga ginagamit na cable? Okay? So meron tayo apat actually. Meron tayong unshielded twisted pair. Meron tayong shielded twisted pair. So these are types of twisted pair cable. Okay? Most commonly ay tawag dito ay Ethernet cable, no? Na gumagamit tayo ng Cat5, Cat6 which is later on will be discussed. Coaxial, okay? Coaxial cable and fiber optic, okay? Mali lang ang spelling. So isa lang yung big niya, fiber optic. Okay? So let's now go to the expound natin yan. Mamaya, yan. So this is the shielded twisted pair. So takbo na tayo dito. So shielded twisted pair and unshielded twisted pair. Okay? Ang pinagkaiba lang nila, may foil at walang foil. Okay? Mamaya papakita ko yung image ng difference between twisted pairs at unshielded. So shielded twisted pair often referred to colloquially as referred as Ethernet cables. Actually, they are same as Ethernet cable. STP cable Employed a special type of copper telephone wiring used for business installation. External shield functioning as a ground is added to standard twisted pair on telephone wires. Okay, so shielded twisted pair can be perfect if you want to separate cables in area with potential interference. And leads to an unshielded twisted pair cable are electrical current. So ang difference lang naman is when it comes to electrical magnetic interference. Okay, so shielded twisted STP can be also help to expand the distance between the cable. So unlike the unshielded, okay, it used for telecommunications naman. Telecommunication industries, Ethernet cables, and telephone wires. Okay? So UTP, so forming a single circuit twisted around one another to cancel out EMI external sources. Usually, yun yung meron sa shielded twisted pair. So balik tayo ulit dito sa module natin. Yan, okay. So pag sinabi naman natin ito, UTP cable, so at least expensive cable. Yes naman, no? Kasi iba-iba rin kasi ang category ng UTP, but at the same time depending on the brand. So it may be susceptible to radio and electrical frequency interference. Okay? It should not be too close to electric motors, fluorescent light, etc. So yun yung mga regarding sa UTP. If we must place cable in environments with lots of potential interference, yung electromagnetic, okay, electrical frequency, you must place in extremely sensitive environments that may be susceptible in electrical current in the UTP. Shielded twisted pair may be the solution. Okay? Kung maiiwasan natin yung ganito. Shielded cables can be helped to extend the maximum distance of the cables. Kumbaga, may shielded siya para, kasi yung UTP kasi maiwasan yung mga, yun nga, sabi ko nga, electrical frequency interference, usually yung mga electrics and lights. Okay? So, next naman natin is coaxial. Okay? So, yung coaxial cable is most commonly ay mapapansin nyo to sa mga digital TV po natin. Okay? Sa mga antena po natin. Ang kable, yung makapal na kable na bilog na yung dulo ay may foil sa gitna. It's coaxial cable. Okay? So, yun yung ano natin. Yun yung ginagamit natin ngayon sa mga TV natin. But of course, ginagamit din siya before sa network, okay? Na pinakita ko last time doon sa pag-create ng bus topology na isang cable gamit ng coaxial. So, single copper conductor as its center, a plastic layer provides insulation between the center of the conductor and the braided metal shield. So, it helps to block any outside interference from fluorescent light motor and other computers. So, yun yung purpose ng mga, yun yung sa UTP. Okay? So, which is hindi siya sensitive. Okay? So, ito rin sa coaxial, no? Kaya siya may mga batawag natin dito. So, yung insulation to block any interference. Okay? So, this cable is commonly used for television industries. Ito na, pinaka-common na siya ngayon. Ngayon, papakita ko lang din yung regarding sa coaxial. Okay? So, ito yung layers ng coaxial. So, this is the conductor. Insulation, which is kulay puti siya. No? Kumbaga, maiwasan yung electro frequencies. Insulation, braided shearing, and sheet. Pero usually yung braided shearing, ano lang yan, para manipis lang siya. And then sheet, ito yung makapal na rubber. Okay? Yan. So this is the sheet, this outer layer. It protects from physical damage. Yan yung sa rubber. So braided sheet, yung parang ito, this one. Parang net. So protect signals for external interference and noise. Yun yung ano naman niya. Insulation, so protects the core that separate from the braided sheet. Okay? So, next conductor, ito na yung magko-connect doon sa mga ano natin. Okay? Yung sa antenna, di ba, sa TV. So, usually, yun din yung sa network natin. Pero mamaya, malalaman yung mga paano siya mako-connect. So, meron tayong single core. Ito yung mga cores natin. Single core and multi-core. Pag single core, makapal lang siya na copper. Unlike sa multi-core, kumbaga parang nakikita natin sa mga AC na maraming copper wires. Okay? So again, ito yung insulator, yung puti. Ito naman yung shield, braided shield. Okay, and then yung sheet. Okay? So, dito tayo. These coaxial cables are not primarily developed by the computer network. These cables were developed for the general purpose. Okay? They are in use even before computer networks came into A610s. So, since nung, syempre, nag-evolve ang ating computer networks, so yung coaxial cable hindi na siya nagamit dito sa atin. So, but nagamit siya before ng mga panahon ng 80s and 90s. Okay? These are the types of the specification of the coaxial cables. So, it depends of course sa data transmittal speed din yan. Okay? So, ito naman, so ulitin lang din natin yung twisted pair. This is known as Ethernet cable. Yan, this consists of color-coded pairs of insulated copper wires. So, may copper wires, tapos it covers ng colored pairs. Okay? Ng colored, ano yan, ng color insulator. No? Mamaya malalaman nyo may mga different purpose yan. So there are 4 pairs. Each pair has one solid color and one stripe color. For example, may green at merong green-white. Okay? So solid colors are blue, brown, green, and orange. Yan yung usually na meron. Pero there are also the pair with the stripe color. So based on how pairs are stripped, so dito tayo sa UTP and STP. Pag UTP, these are all wrapped with the single plastic sheet. Okay? Unlike the STP again, will drop the additional metal sheet that were wrapped in the single outer plastic sheet. So isa-isa siya. Okay? So similarities. Number 1, can transmit data. Same pa din. 10 Mbps, 100 hanggang sa ngayon 10 Gbps tayo. Okay? So again, since STP are more materials, it's more expensive than UTP kasi may foil ang isa-isa doon sa cable sa strip na yon. So 8 strips na yon, 8 para sa 8 pins. So they are both use Rj11 na modular connectors. Okay? STP provides more noise and EMI resistance than the UTP. Medyo maingay when it comes to noise, but of course when it comes to electromagnetic, sa ilaw, sa electric, mas okay si STP. But most commonly pa rin ginagamit is UTP. So maximum is 100 meters. For example, one computer to the switch or router, ang maximum na pwede niya gawin is 100 meters. Kasi yun yung kaya niya i-transmit na until 1 Gbps, 10 Gbps. Depende sa gamit po ninyong category na cable. Or 328 feet. Both cables can accommodate the maximum of 1,024 nodes in each segment. Okay? These are the samples of the UTP and STP. So yung UTP, ito lang siya. It covers by the plastic. It's LAN cable. And the other one is the STP. Isa-isa silang covered by the foil. Okay? So hanapin natin yung Yan. So yun na pala, may sample na tayo. So makikita nyo po yan. No? So these are types of the cables. So dati, we have the Cat1. Okay? It's only 2 pairs of or 4 wires. That's used by the telephone network for voice transmission. Okay? Again, meron pa rin naman tayong telephone wire kasi yun yung ginagamit natin for communication, no? Cat2, yan, may 8 wires with 4 pairs pa din. So lahat sila is used for talking ring. So Cat1, ito, it's not used for the data transmission but it is used for connection sa telephones. Okay? Meron pa rin. So 4 wires yan. Cat3, yan, the first Ethernet cables was used in the LAN networks. Ito na yung technically na LAN connection natin. So Cat3, ang maximum niya is 10 Mbps hanggang dumating tayo sa Cat5. Okay, advanced to, no, 100 Mbps. Pero meron na ngayong Cat6 which is ang bandwidth niya is 250 MHz, data transmission 10 gigabytes per second. Okay, medyo mabilis na to, no? So it uses a plastic cord to prevent crosstalk between twisted pair. It's also used a fire-resistant plastic sheet. So there are mga features na rin ito sa mga kable natin. So most commonly, Cat5, Cat5e, and Cat6 ang ginagamit natin today. Again, pagka UTP gamit natin, it's more cheaper, but at the same time, it varies on the brand. Kung pupunta ka sa Raon, for example, merong Dico na storm. So merong 8 pesos per meter, 10 pesos per meter or yard. So ang pinakamahal ay Belden. Yan ang branded. Okay? It usually 28 pesos hanggang 50 pesos per meter siya. So kung bibili ka ng mga LAN cables na 100 meters, so libo din ang bayad doon. Kasi syempre, kapag ka magsiset up ka ng network, so you have to buy na mas mahaba or a box of LAN cable kasi magsiset up ka and a lot of RJ45 na pin para maggawa ka ng isang network sa isang facility. Okay? So there are those descriptions, yung speed levels natin. And Cat7, yan, hindi pa sa ngayon yan, pero ang meron tayo Cat6. Okay? Next natin is the fiber optic. Ito yung parang sa loob, merong linya na transparent. Kailangan niya ng ilaw para mag-transmit ng kanyang ano. Kasi sa mga UTP coaxial, it uses copper wires. Ang fiber optic, usually yung ginagamit, yung mismong yung core niya, which is parang puti siya na transparent, which is pagka ilaw, data transmits light. So sabi dito, it goes to core, cladding, buffer, and jacket. This core made of thin standard of strands of glass or plastic that carry data over a long distance. So the core is wrapped with the cladding, the cladding is wrapped with the buffer, and buffer in the jacket. So the core carries data signals for the form of light. So yun yung yung source niya para makapag-transmit siya ng data. Unlike kasi yung mga UTP, STP, coaxial, gumagamit ng conductors. So when it comes to speed, mas mabilis si fiber optic. Okay? Cladding reflects light back to the core. Okay? Nagba-bounce back. Buffer protects from light from leaking. Okay? And jacket protects from physical damage. Yun na yun sa panlabas, which is usually plastic din naman ginagamit dyan or rubber. Okay, so fiber optic cable is completely immune to electromagnetic interference. This cable can transmit data over a distance with the highest speed. Kaya niya ng 100 gigabytes per second at 40 kilometers. Okay? And alam naman natin, mostly sa mga internet natin ay fiber connection. Kasi mas kaya niyang mag-transmit ng data ng mas mabilis. Okay? And alam niyo naman po sa fiber optic, very sensitive, hindi ba sa best pwedeng ma-bend. Pag na-bend, of course, sira, wala kang internet kasi may naputol. Very sensitive kasi fiberglass nga siya. Okay? So this will be the illustration regarding the use of fiber optic. Okay? So ito, they are transmitting lights para mag-transmit ng connection. Okay? So they have the single mode and it carries out the single beam. Yan, pakita ko lang. Yan, single mode, isa lang. Okay? More reliable and supports higher bandwidth. But the MF multi-mode, it carries much more data. So, pag more data, multiple beams yung transmit niya. This cable uses an LED as a light source that transmits to 850 or 1,300 nanometer wavelengths of light. Okay? So yan yung sa fiber optic. So pakitaan ko lang ulit kayo ng itsura ng fiber optic. Yan. So ito yung 'di ba yung sa tawag dito 'di ba sa PLDT sa converge, 'di ba yung mula doon sa network sa labas and then may connection na fiber optic cable which is ganito ang itsura. Okay? Wait lang. Ito, yan, fiber optic. Yung kino-connect po natin, yan, nagtatransmit siya ng So, yung source of light, so dito tinatransmit para magkaroon ng okay, connection at the same time data transmission. Yan. Usually, depende rin to sa presyo regarding sa length, okay? So kung ito naman yung nasira doon, 'di ba, doon sa main connection hanggang doon sa modem mo, No, pwede naman siyang palitan kasi dehugot naman siya. But of course, be careful tayo sa mga fiber optic. Siyempre, hindi sila pwedeng mabali. Yan. So, that's an example of fiber optic cables. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, sino tayo? Now, let's go to the network connectors. Siyempre, kung mayroon tayong cable, wala naman tayong connector. Okay? Para mag-connect yung cable, so ito yung ilalagay doon sa cable para mag-connect sa mga devices. Okay? So, watch this.
Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to talk about the different types of connectors that are used in networking. And these connectors will vary depending upon the type of network and the cable that they are attached to, whether that cable is twisted pair, coaxial, telephone, or fiber optic. And the first one we're going to talk about is the Rj45. Now the Rj45 is by far the most common network connector. Now this is an 8-pin connector that's used to connect computers and other network devices in a local area network. The Rj45 is used with unshielded twisted pair cable. Twisted pair cable has 8 wires, and these wires are arranged in a certain order, and then the wires are inserted into an Rj45 connector, and then they are crimped on both ends using a wire crimper. And then one connector would be plugged in to the computer's network card, and then the other end would plug into a device such as a switch, modem, or a router. Then once that is done, the computer will be able to connect to a network. The Rj45 has a single locking tab that locks itself into place. Now this is a UTP coupler. Now this is not really a connector. This is used for connecting UTP cables with Rj45 connectors to each other. This is typically used when running a longer cable is not an option. It's just used to extend a network cable by joining two cables together using their Rj45 connectors. So you would just plug one end of the cable into the coupler, and then you would plug in another cable on the other side. And now you have successfully extended your UTP cable. And another type of connector that is similar to the Rj45 is the Rj48. Now the Rj48 looks very similar to the Rj45, but the difference between the two is that the Rj48 is used with shielded twisted pair cable instead of unshielded twisted pair that's used with the Rj45. The Rj48 is primarily used with T1 lines, and it's also wired differently than the Rj45. And this is the Rj11 connector. This is a 4-wire connector that's mainly used to connect telephone equipment. But as far as networking, the Rj11 is used to connect computers to a local area network through the computer's modem. The Rj11 locks itself into place by a single locking tab, and it resembles the Rj45, but it's a little bit smaller. The Bnc connector is a type of RF connector that is used with coaxial cable. Bnc stands for Bayonet Neil Councilman, and the Bnc is used with both analog and digital video transmissions as well as audio. Now these connectors are not very common anymore, but they can still be found on older networks. Now there are many different kinds of Bnc connectors. So for example, here is a Bnc T connector, which connects 3 coaxial cables together. And there is also the Bnc coupler, which is used to connect 2 coaxial cables together. And there is also the Bnc terminator, which is used to terminate the ends of a cable. Now this connector is called the F-type. Now this is a threaded connector typically used on coaxial cables. These are primarily used by cable providers to attach to cable modems. So if you have broadband cable like I do, you will have a modem with a coaxial cable attached to an F-type connector that screws into the back of your modem that attaches with a nut. And in addition to being used with broadband cable, they are also used with satellite internet. And there is also the USB connector. The USB is very common on desktops and laptops, and because universal is in its name, it can be used for many different purposes, including networking. So for example, many manufacturers make USB wireless adapters that plug into a USB port on a computer to give the computer wireless network access. And there is also wired network adapters, like this one here, where you would plug an Ethernet cable at one end and then the other end into a USB port on a computer. And then the computer will be able to access a network through its USB port. So now we're getting into fiber optic connectors. Now fiber optic networks use pulses of light to send data, and there are many different types of fiber optic connectors. But I'm only going to talk about the most popular fiber connectors. But the main differences between these fiber connectors are the size and the method they use when coupling. So the first fiber optic connector is called the SC or standard connector, and this is often called the square connector. And this was one of the first connectors to be used in the marketplace. This uses a push-pull connector similar to audio and video plugs, and these are commonly used between floors in a building. This connector is called the MTRJ, which stands for Mechanical Transfer Register Jack, and this is a fiber optic connector that uses a latched push-pull connection. It has a small form factor that's used for high pack density, and it was designed to replace the SC connector. The MTRJ uses two fibers in a single design, and it resembles the RJ45. This connector is becoming increasingly popular in fiber networks today. And our next fiber connector is called the LC or local connector, or Lucent Connector, since it was developed by Lucent. Now this type of connector is also commonly used between floors in a building, and it was designed to compete with the SC connector. It's about half the size of the SC connector, which makes it better for highly populated racks and panels. And this also uses a latch that locks itself into place, similar to the RJ45. And our last fiber optic connector is called the ST or straight tip. Now this uses a half-twist bayonet type of lock and is commonly used with single-mode fiber optic cable. Now this is a large size connector that was developed by AT&T, and because of its large size, its usage has declined in favor of smaller connectors such as the LC and the MTRJ. Now just like UTP couplers, there are also fiber couplers. So if you wanted to join two fiber optic connectors, you would use a fiber coupler. Now fiber couplers are used to join or couple two of the same fiber optic connectors, and the two connectors have to be the same. Now these are not to be confused with fiber adapters, because fiber adapters are used for joining two different connectors together. So here we have an example of a fiber coupler joining two ST connectors together. So now we're going to talk about the difference between UPC and APC end faces or tips on fiber optic connectors. And as examples, we're going to use a group of ST fiber connectors equipped with UPC and APC end faces. Now when fiber optic connectors make a connection to each other, the point at which the connection is made is not perfect because of the small imperfections of the flat surfaces. So what happens is at the point where the connectors join, light is transmitted from one connector to the other connector. But at the point where light passes to the other connector, the light will reflect back in the opposite direction towards the light source. And when this happens, there is signal loss. And this is what happens in UPC connectors. The light is reflected directly back. So as technology progressed, a new connector was developed to decrease the signal loss. And this new connector is called the Apc connector. Now the difference between the UPC and the APC is the angle of the end face or tip where the connection is made. So as I said before, with the UPC, the light reflects back towards the light source. But with the APC, with its angled connection, the light doesn't reflect back towards the light source. It reflects back at an angle into the wall of the cable. And as a result, this greatly reduces the signal loss. So thank you everyone for watching this video on network connectors. Please subscribe.
Yan. So, balik tayo. So, explain ko lang iba dito. Yan. This is the common lead. This is RJ45, which is connected to the modem, switches, and routers natin. Okay? So, yun yung basically, nakakonect yan sa ating Cat5, Cat6 na LAN cables natin. Okay? Yung RJ45, mura lang yan. So, usually, 3 pesos to 5 pesos isa. Pero may mga nabibili na maramihan. Okay? So next naman natin UTP coupler. Ito naman pa network connect extender. For example, let's nakabili ka ng 5 meters tapos gusto mo na mas mahaba kasi bumili ka pa na mas mahaba kasi kumbaga yung convenience, or pwede naman din na pwede naman bumili ka ng mahaba pero kung gusto mo na mag-i-extend na lang, no, kasi may nabili kang 10 and then 5 for example, you can use UPT coupler. So may bili naman yan sa mga sa cyber zone, sa mga network, sa mga computer parts. Or meron naman nabibili yan sa Shopee. So, ang ginagawa lang yan, nag-extend. Okay? Next naman is RJ48, the same with the RJ45, but is mainly purpose for the shielded twisted pair. But of course, RJ45 used also for the STP. Next is BNC. Ito na yung sinasabi ko kanina. 'Di ba yung pinakita kong video last time about doon sa ring bus topology para within the line, so para mag-connect yung nasa gitna, mag-connect sa part na to, so kailangan ng Bnc connector. Okay? So usually ano yan, male and female ang ano niyan, ang connector. Okay? Ito namang isa, ayan, ito split din to connector. Ano naman to, extenders naman ito. Okay? Para mag-extend yung isang coaxial to another, saka isa pang coaxial cable. Okay? So tandaan nyo, usually pag mga ganitong connector, mga ang type niyan female. Okay? Kasi ito male. Kasi meron tayong connector. Ito kasi parang receiver para mag-connect sila. Okay? F-type. Ito, most commonly sa mga TV. Okay? Di ba yung coaxial, meron siyang F-type, i-connect niya doon para mag-firm yung connection. Ito yung isasaksak sa mismong TV. So, yun yung basically purpose niyan. Okay? So, available yan. Kasi dati kasi available yan. Pero sabi ko nga is more on television network. Ito naman, yung USB natin, USB Wi-Fi adapter. Kung wala kang PCI extender ng parang extender ng Wi-Fi, kasi ang system unit wala naman talagang built-in na Wi-Fi. So you can, number 1, yung sa PCI slot, bumili ka ng Wi-Fi receiver, okay, PSB yun. Or number 2, USB na lang. So binabibili to, mga worth 500 plus din to 700 pesos yung USB Wi-Fi adapter. So may CD yan, i-install mo lang para yung system unit mo, okay, so matik meron ng Wi-Fi receiver. Or kung ayaw mo, LAN cable ka. Okay? So meron din naman tayong USB Ethernet adapter, which is ito naman, hindi naman Wi-Fi. Ano naman to connect your yung RJ45, which is yung LAN cable mo. Okay? So for example, walang driver yung ano mo. Okay? So you can use USB Ethernet adapter. Okay? So ano pa ba? Yan. Usually ito, mga fiber optics na yan. So ito yung kanina sinasabi ko that connects to your modem. Okay? So meron tayong single. Yan, meron din tayong 2 pins. So yan po yung about sa ating mga fiber optic cable natin. Okay? So let's proceed na sa ating network connection. Okay, let's go to the network connection. So doon na tayo magfo-focus sa twisted pair cables. Okay, sabi natin yung twisted pair cables, they have 8 pins. Okay? So let's go to the straight through versus crossover. Kasi meron tayo, kasi mamaya i-discuss ko kung paano maggawa ng LAN cable. okay, ng Ethernet cable. Ipapasok yung RJ45, mag-aayos tayo ng pins, ipapasok yon, and then paano ba yung mga purpose nila? Okay, let's go to the crossover versus straight through. Okay, so table types, the most commonly network table is called as UTP, and a shielded twisted pair. The cable format is used for the Ethernet wiring standards that manage of IEEE or Institute of Electrical Electronics Engineers, kasi they are standards, no? Katulad ng ISO, may mga standards regarding sa mga ano. May mga standards din tayo with comes to electronics, okay? With this kind of industry. This wire standard is referred to the code 802.3. Ethernet standards are open to anyone to read. They include the specification of table configurations and type of connectors to plug cables into devices. So it's specifically called Ethernet networks. Okay? So these are distinguished between straight through, crossover, and rollover. But of course, dalawa pag-uusapan natin. Okay? So UTP contains 8 wires. So each individual is covered by the colored plastic coating na wire yan. Okay? And of course, this treatment to protect wires from interference. That's the purpose of the yung mga insulators sa plastic doon, each wire. Okay? So, then yung ano natin, yung UTP, they are 4 colors talaga. So, 4 solid colors and 4 stripe colors. But basically, they are green, blue, orange, and brown. The rest is green, white, orange, white, blue, white, brown, white. Okay? So, the end of the connector should be RJ45. Okay? So, RJ45 is the continued format of telephone wires connector, but the proper name is according to 8.2.802.3. The wiring standard is 8PHC, which is 8 position, 8 connectors. However, don't make a fuss if you're a network technician, called the connector RJ45. Okay? But of course, naging generic na rin kasi yung term na gamit doon para ma-connect sa mga pins yung RJ45. Okay? So, but basically, it is APHC. Okay. So, the standard sequence, that color wire, that 8PHC connector, so it is ordered as follows. So, orange, green, blue, ayan, sabi, orange, white, orange, green, white, blue, white, green, brown, white, brown. So, yun yung ano natin. So, dito yan. Pakita ko ulit. Okay, this one yun. Okay, orange, white. Sabi dito. Yan. Yan. Orange, white, orange. Okay, ito po yun. So, yun yung order niya with regards doon sa ating UTP cable. Balik tayo. So, ito yung A and B to kasi. So, connector layout listed above is specified by the standard EIA 568B, was defined by EIA. Ayan. So, standard you will call the ANSI 568B. The layout the connector is illustrated below, which is orange-white na nabanggit natin kanina. Okay? So, this is the format, okay, na pagkakasunod-sunod nila. Okay? However, yung isa naman, so yung EIA 568A naman, yung kabila. So, okay? So, simula sa green, white, balik tayo, ito yon. Green, white, green hanggang sa brown. Balik tayo. So, it doesn't matter which of the standards you use, just as long as consistent with crimping connectors onto both ends at the cables. Okay? So, whether this one or this one, so wala naman siyang kumbaga, hindi naman siya mako-compromise, no? As long as na tama, syempre, yung pagkakalagay mo, okay, tama yung pagkakasunod ng color. Okay. So, what's the purpose? Okay? It doesn't matter how color goes while into connector. Okay? First of all, UTP is always used for Ethernet networks, doesn't need to contain 8 wires. However, in this convention, the blue pair and the brown pair don't do anything. Okay? Kasi may mga receiving sila mamaya sa pins. The wires within dollar jack is identical. If you strip the casing, the blue stripe, it looks exactly the same. The orange solid white, it's striped. Okay, in fact, there are two different sets of guidelines of wiring and RJ45 could lead to chaos. Okay, so dito na tayo sa data transmission. Okay, data transmission equipment and data circuit terminating equipment. So may pagkakaiba sila. Okay? So when it comes to two types of connects that connect to a network, pag sinabi natin data terminal equipment, it refers to your computer. Okay? So yung data terminal, computer, printer, okay? So that's the connect to each other. So this is a data circuit terminating. Ito naman yung mga network device, modem, router, switch, hub. Okay? So to distinguish, it's important to work out whether you use a straight through or the crossover. Okay? So ano ba yung difference nila? Okay? So bagsak na tayo. Pag straight through kasi, so when you connect two devices of different types together, for example, yung laptop mo, isasaksak yung LAN cable sa modem. Isasaksak sa router. So computer to, okay, to route at computer to router, we will use straight through cable. Okay? For example, you connect devices to the same type to the crossover together. For example, okay, pwede ring router to ganito, to switch. Okay? So, crossover. Okay, yun yung ano natin. So, computer to computer, crossover. Printer to computer, crossover. Okay? Kasi syempre, may specification sila eh. Straight, data transmission and data circuit terminal equipment. Okay, so balik tayo dito para mas maintindihan pa natin. So DTEs and DCEs, ayan, so distinction between DTEs important when you work out together, use a straight through and a crossover. Okay, kapag DTE kasi, so there are some pins that will be transmit positive and negative signal, transmit and receive. Okay, unlike sa data transmission, so there are parts na there are parts that transmit and receive positive and negative signal. But technically, apat sa kanila yung gumagana sa pins nila. Okay? So doon tayo sa straight through. So it's called the wired patch cable or the Ethernet cable that comes in the box. The router is a straight through cable, the most common format for network cables. Okay? So straight through is configured as described above. It doesn't matter whether the cable you device follows doon sa dalawang format natin, which is this one. So kahit ano dyan ang masunod sa straight through. Okay? The connectors on both ends are exactly the same to the socket of your computer. So now, may ano tayo sa, so again, yung straight through, computer to router. Okay? So yun yung ano natin, yung basically, kasi DTE, data transmission to DCE. Kasi pagka DCE to DCE, yan, DTE to DTE, we use crossover cable. So, for example, printer cables. Okay? Kasi kapag you need to connect your printer, this is the data, kasi is data transmission siya eh. So, i-connect to a switch, you need a straight through. Kasi syempre, may mga computers na magpiprint din sa isang printer. So, it use network para mag-communicate to set a command o mag-print tong, ito, si computer 1 magpiprint to, si computer 5 magpiprint to. So, use the straight cable kasi nakakonect siya sa itong switch. But, if gagawin natin, kung ko-connect natin yung printer sa computer, we cannot use a straight to cables. When it comes to network to ha. Okay? So you use straight through tinatawag natin crossover. Okay? So next natin crossovers, yan. It crosses over the wire from pin 1 and at 1 end to pin 3 in other connectors. So magkaiba sila. So, sa crossover kasi, yung connector niya, ito, yung connector pang straight through, may sa dulo niya may pang connection na pang crossover. Okay? So, na-explain na natin yung straight through, the crossover. Okay? Let's go ngayon doon sa ating how to Ito yung sa wiring guide natin yan. Okay? So, pagka straight through, ito yung format natin. which is same pa din. For example, this one, green, white, green, orange, white, blue, blue, white, orange, brown, white, brown. So same as true din yan sa dulo. Whether this one or this one ang susundin mo. Okay? So either of the two. Next. Ito naman, hindi pala, sorry. Okay, so kung ito, T568A, so this one yon yung format. So same pin, connector A to connector B, T568A. Okay? So susunod naman yung crossover, yung isang dulo pang straight through, which is yung green-white, this one. Okay, ito yon. And then yung kabilang naman niya, ito na, yung orange-white na magsisimula, this one. So ibig sabihin, ulitin ko, pagka straight through, ito ang in, ito yung A and B, straight through. So this one, T568, ito din siya, yan. So parehas lang din sila. Pero pagka sinabi nating crossover, ito ang mauna, ito ang pangalawa. So ibig sabihin, magpagkaparehas sila. So para makita yung illustration, ito ay orange-white, ito ay green-white. Yan. So green-white, then orange-white. So makita nyo, magkakaiba na sila ng pwesto. Okay? So yan yung sa straight through, ito yung sa crossover. Ito yung crossover. Kailangan mauna muna yung A, then B. Dito sa straight through, pares lang sila. Okay? So you know about the purpose kung ano ang gamit ng straight through at ng crossover. Now, let's go to the procedure kung paano ba gumawa, okay? Paano tayo magkakabit ng cable, okay? Sa RJ45 sa LAN cable para ma-testing natin sa computer. And after that kasi, kung meron kayong tester, yun, malalaman nyo yun kung tama. Okay? So, dito tayo ulit sa panibagong video.
Hi, my name is Kane, and I'm here to help you. Today we're going to show you how to make a Category 5 and Category 6 patch cable. I've found in my travels that nobody knows how to make this. Even big network administrators who, like, make more money than me, and they run my network, and they're like, hey, I need a patch cable. Do you know how to make it? No, I don't. Here, let me get a diagram. I learned how to make this when I was 14. You should know how to make these. They're simple. They're easy. We're going to need a Category 5E or Cat 5E patch cable. So we're going to have a length of cable that we've selected. We've got one about 10 feet right here. And we're going to need 2 modular plugs, RJ45. We also have our Cat6, which we also have about 10 feet of cable here. And we have a Category 6 modular plug. Also, you're going to need an RJ45 crimping tool. These things you can pick up at your local hardware store, Home Depot, Lowe's, that kind of thing. You can find them online. They're relatively inexpensive, and you can use these to make hundreds of cables. This one's 300 years old. People will always ask you what's the difference between Cat 5e and Cat 6. And first and foremost, Cat 6 is a bigger cable. It is a higher standard of cable. It is able to shoot gigabit networks down with a lot less crosstalk, which is the noise that is made with the electricity running over the wires talking to each other, and it creates it slows down your network if you got too much crosstalk. So Cat 5e will be good for gigabit. Cat 6 is just better for gigabit networks. If you find Cat 5 cable, which does not have the E, it will not work for gigabit networks at all. Just don't try it. It's not cool. You'll be like, why is my network so slow? It's because you're not using good enough cable. Also, if you're doing this out of your home, Cat 6 is expensive by comparison to Cat 5e. We're talking like 30 cents a foot versus Cat 5e, which is probably like 15, 16. I haven't looked at the prices recently, but it's expensive to get Cat 6. So unless you really need the higher standard cable, get Cat 5e, it'll do just fine. So we want to scar the cable sheath so we can break away the sheath and expose our conductors on the inside. So we're going to use it just very gentle. We're going to scar the cable sheath with the cable wire, or with the cutter there. And now we're just going to bend the cable, and you can see the real stress here. You can bend it, and you can put some stress on it, and it'll break away. Alright. Get the sheath exposed. Now once we're here, we want to separate out our pairs, and you'll notice this little string here. This is actually for pulling back and exposing more of the cable. So you pull this back down this way, and it'll just cut the cable down. I'm not going to do it because I don't need any more than this. But you can just very carefully clip that string away. Here I've untwisted all of our conductors into our different color codes. We've got our orange pair, our brown pair, a green pair, and the blue pair. We want them to be in this order I'm going to give you right now. It's going to be white with the orange stripe, orange. And then it's going to be white with the green stripe, solid blue, white with the blue stripe, solid green, white with the brown stripe, solid brown. The next thing we want to do is we want to cut back the conductors to the proper length so they will fit nicely with our modular plug. There's a crimp on the inside of the plug that will be pushed down when you crimp it with the crimping tool. It's a lot of crimping. You want the sheath to be extended past this little space here, so it will get crimped down and it will hold your cable in place. Okay, so these conductors have to come all the way up to the end of the mod plug, and we want this blue sheath to come extend past the crimping space that's right here. So we're going to measure about where we want it, and we figure this length is good. And we want to cut, but we don't want to cut at an angle, we want to cut as straight across as possible. That's why we use these wire cutters. They explode everywhere. Now you can see a little bit of deviations, but it's going to be okay because it'll flush up in the end of the conductor. Next, we're going to very carefully, and you want to, at this point, just double check your wires, make sure that they're again in the correct order. That's white, orange, orange, white, green, blue, green, white, brown, brown. And you're going to be very careful. You want to set them inside, and I don't know if you can see it. The wires are actually being separated out inside the plug along little tracks, and they'll go all the way. Push it as far up as you can. Give it a little push. The sleeve will go up further. That's probably a good thing. You can check the end, and you'll see the copper conductors right along the end. That'll be nice and shiny. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and crimp the cable down. You want to make sure that you don't wiggle this too much once it's in place, and you're going to slot the mod plug into the Rj11 connector on the crimping tool. Again, check the other side of the cable. Make sure you see all the copper conductors. And I usually do this 2 or 3 times. You'll see here with this pushed down onto the cable. It's a nice solid connection. These wires get crimped down, and it pierces the sheath. This is where you can see the copper conductors are flush with the edge of the connector. That's how you know you're going to have a nice, good, solid connection. Alright, now we're going to do this with a Cat6 cable. The procedure is more or less the same. There's subtle differences. The things that make this cable better are also what make it harder to work with and easier to work with at the same time, and I'll explain it as I go along. The sheath is a little thicker because it's a bigger cable, and it's going to be easier to score and break open. So let's... Look at that. Came clean apart. There you go. Now, you can see this is a lot different. We still have the string for tearing back the sheath. We don't need it. Careful not to cut any of your wires. Now, Cat6 cable has got a larger conductor. This is a 22 gauge wire, where the Cat5e is a 24 gauge wire. Which means that this, for all of you Europeans, this is bigger. Just a little bit, but it's bigger. This piece is just a big glop of insulation. It separates out all of the wires and runs the entire length of the cable. So each pair, as you can see the twists here, each pair is separate down the length of the cable. And they do this to, again, eliminate crosstalk, which is the noise that is generated, the electromagnetic noise that is generated by these wires with electricity flowing through them does not crosstalk over to here. Or it does, but it's minimal. Very carefully, we want to just remove this bit of insulation because it just makes our lives a living hell. If you clip any of the wires and you can see an exposed piece of copper, cut your cable and start again, because that exposed wire will actually create more noise coming out of the conductor, or it will release more noise coming out of the conductor, and it degrades the cable, so it makes it so your speeds won't be as high as you want them to be. Also, I'd like to point out that these wires are more finely twisted together. There's more twists per cable and per conductor per pair than with the Cat5e, and that's again because of eliminating more crosstalk. So the order of operation here is white, orange, orange, white, green, blue, and it's going to be a real pain in the ass getting this wrapped around properly, but we're going to put it over there. I'm going to do white, blue, and then it's going to be green, it's going to be white, brown, and brown. And we want to flatten these out as much as possible, which is what I'm doing here. I just kind of wiggle them around until they just flatten out. Again, we want to measure the length of what we're looking at. But then I'm going to introduce this little piece, and I'm going to confuse you all. This slides into the middle of this, and it's just another piece of insulation that protects from crosstalk. So we want to cut this a little higher out, and we want to put these into this connector, and they will find their way right to where they need to be, if I can get them all in there. Just wiggle it around a little bit. This piece and the finished product will end in the conductor or the modular plug right about there. So we want this as far down as we can because we want this piece to crimp the sheath. So what I usually do is I measure out where I want this. I put our little pieces all the way to where we want it to measure the length, because that's where the end is going to be. We use our trusty wire cutter and clip right along the edge, and I'm holding this piece in place with my thumb and my forefinger, and we're going to clip off the rest of those. So now it's right flush with that, and that's what it's going to look like. Alright, we're going to go ahead and put this into the mod plug. You can see it's a little uneven, but that's okay, because once we get it in here and get it slotted into place, all these pieces, push it all the way in. You want to make sure that, again, you see all the copper conductors along the edge. Here, we're going to, again, push this all the way in. Double check the ends here. Crimp it all the way down. Give it a nice good squeeze. Do it twice just to be sure. And there's your cable. Okay, you can see that it's crimped down on the sheath. Everything is in place. The spacer is inside. Everything is in place. Looks great. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful. For all you students out there, show this to your teachers. For all you teachers out there, showing this to your students, hello. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Everybody else, network admins, if you are watching this video, there's something wrong with you. No, really. I'm glad you're watching this video. Subscribe, rate, comment, check out Tek Syndicate. If you have any questions, the forums are the best place to find answers to everything. If you don't find them, ask the question. Someone will answer it, or I will. It's a great place to check out. Also, you can email me, kane@teksyndicate.com. I think that's everything. Don't make me come strangle you with this cable. Have a great day.
Okay. So yun yung on how to create RJ48 network cable. So sa mga LAN cable natin, whether Cat5, Cat6, no? Again, whether straight through or crossover. So yung as discuss natin kanina, so may malaman natin kung saan ba natin siya i-connect. Okay? So kung typically the normal thing is, for example, computer to a router nyo sa mga bahay nyo, use straight through. Okay? And you can be, pwede naman kayo bumili kasi mas medyo, kung bibili kayo, medyo, syempre para mas matutunan nyo, bibili kayo RJ45, bibili kayo ng LAN cable, pero pwede naman din kayo bumili ng mga naka-set up na. But of course, syempre, mas mabilisan yon. Pero syempre, pag nagwo-work na kayo at talaga medyo gamay na kayo sa ginagawa, pwede, you can use yung gagawa kayo ng sarili nyong cable. Kasi kayo, matatansya nyo pa kung ilang metro. Kasi yung mga nabibiling mga built-in na 5 meters, 3 meters, doon sa ginagawa, which is malalaman mo, customize. 'Di ba? Yung ano natin. And of course, yung crimping tool, kailangan din yon kapag magse-set up po tayo ng creation ng ating LAN cable. Okay? So ito lang naman yung lecture natin. This will be part 3 ng ating computer network, no? Setup computer networks. Tomorrow, yung ano naman OSI kasi it's part of the network, yung mga network layers naman. So yun naman yung di-discuss natin tomorrow. Okay? So do you have questions so far?